Hi, I'm Larry Puckett. Well, today, as the title of the video suggested, we're going to do some painting here on the modules. Specifically, I'm going to cut this sucker outside and we're going to blast it with some brown spray paint. So stick around for the video and I'll show you how I prepare the rails so that you'll be able to get a lot of that dried paint off before it's a real problem for you, because it's going to get on the top of your rails and you don't want it there permanently. So let's get started. Hit that little red subscribe button, and when the little bell comes up, click on it and click all. Now, before we do get started with the painting, there's one thing I wanted to address from last week's comments. There were several people that noticed that there was some flickering and stuttering of that little locomotive that I was using for my test drive. And there was a couple of reasons for that I found out after the fact. But one of them is one that I've known about for a long time, that this locomotive right here that I used has a very short wheelbase. So it's a very sensitive running locomotive. And I typically operate this with another one that's identical to it. I run them together and wire them together to create what I call my poor man's keep alive. And I'll put a link to the video where I describe that above me here. And basically what it does is I wire the pickups together on both locomotives. And that way I double the length of the locomotive. So it makes it easier to get over track like that double crossover here on the module. Now, in addition to that, after the fact, I went ahead and took a look at it and cleaned the wheels. And sure enough, it had been sitting on my workbench for over a year without having a wheel turned. So I cleaned the wheels, and after that, it ran pretty good. But let me show you one other reason for why it was having some problems. So I'm going to bring you in here real close. Okay, so right here, this is what came off of those wheels. So it ran a lot better after that. Now, take a look right here. You'll notice that right here we have 1, 2, 3, 4 frogs. And these are the frogs that these feeders are connected to. So there's the feeder here, 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 and here for this frog, this one, and this one. However, notice right here. This is a plastic frog, so it is not powered at all. And there's another one right here. And these are fairly large frogs. In addition, if you look right here, we've got an insulating insert that's all plastic. So we've got a number of different areas here that are not powered. And because of the short wheelbase of this locomotive, it can actually end up on two insulated areas at the same time, either here, 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 that kind of thing. And so that was causing some of the problems that you were seeing. But like I said, it was mainly an issue dealing with the fact that the wheels were dirty. Also, my RS11, when I ran it through here, with its much longer wheelbase and clean wheels, you can see how sparkly clean those are, it had no problems at all. So what it comes down to is a matter of keeping your wheels clean. And one of the things that we're going to be doing in the future with this guy is Nick Santo of Nick's Trains has started producing keep alives or stay alives. And he's made some very small ones. So he volunteered to send me a set of his new stay alives. And I will be installing one in this locomotive right here in the future. And we'll see how much better it performs after that. Okay, so that's all I wanted to go over with you today, but be aware that if you use a double crossover, that it does have these 1, 2, 3, 4 areas that are plastic, and that can create problems for very small wheelbase locomotives, be they steam or diesel. Okay, so now let's take a look at some of the preparations I've been making here for doing the painting of the track. For that, I'm going to come out a little bit. So one thing I did was I went back over all of my solder joints with my cotton swab and some alcohol, and I cleaned them to remove any excess flux and residue from the soldering process. So I got those pretty clean. You want to do that because you want your paint to be able to stick to your rails, and it doesn't stick to resin flux all that well. So that's one thing to go ahead and remember to do before you start to do your painting. Now, another thing that you want to do is you want to cover the points. Now, you can see where I've done that here with some blue painter's tape. And I've done that to all of my sets of points, except these right here. So I saved that as a demonstration. So we'll pull out some of this blue painter's tape. And this is masking tape that has a very low-tack adhesive. And so it doesn't leave a lot of residue after you remove it. So I'm just going to pull off a piece. And right here you can see the points. Now, the reason that I'm doing this is not so much because of electrical issues, because these are powered by jumpers. If you remember the underside of these turnouts, there's all kinds of jumpers that provide power to these closure rails and point rails. So that's not an issue. They're going to be electrified no matter what. But there's a lot of places in here where if you get paint down in this area here, it can easily dry and basically act like glue and clog these up, and it's going to be a pain in the neck to get them moving again after you finish your painting. So it's just a lot easier to take the painter's tape and put it right over those points like that. And that way, you're not going to blow paint down in those crevices, and when you're done, you can just peel that off and you'll be ready to go. The one thing you will have to do after the fact, though, you will need to come along with a small paintbrush and paint the sides of the rails that obviously are not going to receive a coat of paint. So that's one thing I've done. All of these are all ready to go now. Now, let's talk about another thing, and for that I'm going to move you down here. Now, obviously, we're going to be coating these rails with paint. So the question is, how are you going to get the top of the rails clean after the fact? Well, it can be a fairly easy process if you do it right away before the paint has a chance to get real good and dry. You can just take and run a rag along the top of the rails like that, and that paint will come right off. Not really a problem. However, this one here, I'm kind of concerned because this is a fast-drying camouflage paint. It's a dark brown color, and it is ultra flat finish, which I wanted for these side of the rails, non-reflective. You don't want any of that glossy or even a satin finish, really. And it says that it's fast drying. So I'm going to be kind of on top of trying to clean these rails fairly quickly. But there's a number of things that you can do, and I've done some of these in the past. One thing is you can take a bar of soap, like plain old ivory soap, and run it on the top of the rails like that, and it will leave a little coat of soap on the top of your rails. And then afterwards, all you need to do is take a damp cloth and run it on the top of your rails, and that should come off without too much problem. Another thing you can do is just get a little bit of baby oil, something like that, on a rag, and put that on the top of your rails. And then, after you're done painting, then it's very easy to run a clean cloth over that and pull it right up. And you could do the same thing with Vaseline or whatever, any kind of light oil like that. Do not do something like spray oil on your track, because that way the paint is not going to stick to the sides of the rails. And that's what you want to do. You want the sides of the rails and the ties to get a nice dark brown color, and then you can move on and remove the paint from the tops of your rails. Now, I have seen examples where people let it dry too long, and they ended up having to scrape it off with the flat tip of a screwdriver. And literally, that's what I've seen them do. And it can be very difficult to get that dried paint off. If you do need anything, you can start with some alcohol. If you try to use any strong organic solvents on your rail heads to remove the paint, make sure you test it on a scrap piece of track first, because the last thing you want is to have your ties and your spikes start to melt on you because you've used some incompatible organic solvent. Okay, now, like I said, I'm going to be using this very dark brown. If you've ever been out and walked along the side of a railroad, you know that a nice rusty orange is very uncommon on the sides of rails. You might find it in a pile of new rails sitting on the side of the track somewhere, But for the most part, this stuff, it ages fairly quickly to a very dark brown, almost black. And there's a big difference, too, between your mainline and your industrial trackage and things of that nature, because the mainline gets a lot of grease and grime from the locomotives and the cars and the bearings and all of that stuff. And typically what I've done in the past is make up my own rail brown, and I take a 50-50 mixture of Pullman green and roof brown acrylic paint together, and that gives me this dirty, dark gray almost brown color. And I do use this with an airbrush to touch up areas, for example, and make areas very dark. So around a set of points or something like that, where they're going to be a lot more grease, I will spray it with this stuff. But for the most part, though, I found this is a very nice dark brown based on the cap. Hopefully it'll come out that color. So it's going to look pretty close to what you're going to see on the prototype. But you can always come back with an airbrush and spot paint certain areas on your track that you want to make them look a little bit different, because if you go out there and look, there's a lot of differences on the rails. And I'm going to try to experiment back here with some of these industrial rails, hand painting some of these ties and giving them a little bit more character. But on the main line, they used to pull out all the old ties and replace them with new creosote saturated ties, so they were a nice dark color. Okay, so I'm not going to do this in the house. I'm going to disconnect the two modules, and we're going to roll it out into the driveway, and we'll get out the spray can and start blasting the rails and trying to clean as we go. And then once this one's done, we'll bring it back. Well, I'll leave it out in the driveway to degas for a while and dry some, and I'll bring out the second module. So let's get started with that. Okay, here we are. It's a nice bright sunny day, just a little bit cool, so I had to put on a shirt. But I've got the module out here. I've been shaking the paint can quite a bit, making the can rattle. So I think we're ready to give it a try. I'm going to bring you in a little bit closer so you can see what I'm doing. Okay, I'm going to start up at this end, and I've got you in close enough. Now you can't see me. But at any rate, the important thing when you're spraying is to keep the angle low, because you want to come in from the side at a low angle, catch the sides of the rails. And that way, if you spray from the top, you're going to build up a lot of paint on the top of the rails. Whereas this, you want to get a nice even coating along the sides of the rails. And I'll do first on the outside, and then we'll go back and do it from the other side as well. Okay, let's give it a try. I think I've got it pretty well shaken up. Okay, let's move down this way and knock it off down here. Okay, I've got a section of rag, so let's clean the top of these rails fast here. And like I said, it comes right off as long as you catch it before it dries hard. Let me bring in here real close so you can see this. So as you follow along, you can see it's getting it right down to the rails. Getting bare metal there. But it's starting to harden up now. You can see it just comes right off the top of these rails for the most part. Okay, as soon as I finish this, then I'll turn it around and we'll do the other side, but I'm not going to bore you with that. Okay, this stuff has started to dry now, so I went in, got a piece of my cork road bed, and we'll give that a try. Back here on this section, that does a pretty good job. But you don't want to let this stuff dry because it is difficult to get it off here. This is my Bright Boy from DCC Concepts that I showed you, this does a pretty good job too. Does a better job than the cork, that's for sure. You can see it's bringing it off quite nicely, even though it's starting to get a little hard. And remember, this is the low abrasive Bright Boy that DCC Concepts sells. You can get these from Iron Planet Hobbies. Ah, okay, yeah, that's coming nice and clean now. This is what I sprayed the first, so it's dried a little bit harder on here. I think everything's cleaned up enough to where I can go ahead and spray the other side. So let's flip that around. So I'm going to bring it in at a low angle. Try not to get too much on the top of the rails. Let me tell you, you don't want to use this inside your house. It stinks, and I'm out here in the driveway. Well, I tell you, this Krylon paint, it really dries hard and it dries fast, as they said in the instructions. So be aware of that. I think what I will do on the next one, paint a section at a time and clean it off and then finish some more. Okay, for the final cleanup, I got some lacquer thinner out here, and I'm going to very carefully apply that just to the surface of the rails to get off this residue that's up here. And it does a very good job. But be very careful doing it because you don't want it to get down there on your ties. So I've just got a little bit here on the tip of this rag. And you can see how fast it takes it off. Be very careful because lacquer thinner might get down there and attack that plastic. What I want to do now, though, is I'm going to start peeling off the tape that I put on to protect the points. So you can see this area right here needs cleaning up pretty much. We'll get it right up there. And you can see how quickly that comes off with just a dab. And I mean just a dab. That's just barely moist of that lacquer thinner. Takes it right off of there. There you go. That's how quick and easy it is with the right stuff and being very, very careful. Okay, I'm going to look it over one more time and then bring out the other one. Now for this section of rail, I'm going to try using the bar of soap. So we'll wipe that across the top of the rails like this and try to give it a nice little thin coat. Then we'll get the paint and give it a shot. Okay. Okay, that's a pretty good coat right there. Now let's flip it around, do the other side. Let's see here. There we go, good coat. First, I'm going to go ahead and use my piece of cork road bed since it's fresh paint. And you can see if you get it fresh, it comes right off of there. And it's starting to dry already. I can feel it starting to drag. Okay, so I'm going to work on this piece of track back here because it's sort of off by itself. And I'm going to apply the soap trick. And we'll give that a shot here. Okay, I dug up a smaller piece of cardboard. And what I'm going to do is just use it to cover the track while I'm applying it back here. There. Now let's go ahead and get that cleaned up right away. So first I'll pull it off with the cloth. See how that does. Okay, that did a pretty good job actually. The important thing is to catch it while it's still tacky or wet. Once it starts to dry, this stuff is tough. Now I'll get out the wet rag and see how that works. That's doing it. It's coming right off with that wet rag. So that soap is very quickly releasing. So keep your bar of soap handy. Okay, got my bar of soap here, so let's get the double crossover coated. Now I'm going to blow off all the excess. Okay. Okay, that's one side. And let me catch the other side here real quick. Let's see what we can do here. Okay, there's the first line. Okay, let me run down this side. Okay, that seems to have got most of it off. Let's go and see if the soap will bring off any more. Oh yeah, look how clean that comes now. It's a lot easier using that soap. Let me finish cleaning up and then we'll take a look. Okay, now I've got it all cleaned up and ready to go back inside as soon as it finishes airing out. Okay, so this will give you a bird's eye view of what it looks like now that it's painted and the rail heads are all nice and clean. You can see those areas where those points were covered, and I'll come back later with a paintbrush and some of my Magic Mix paint and cover that all up. But you can see it's all pretty well cleaned up. That's the double crossover there, nice and shiny in there, so we're not going to have any problems. And all the way down to the far end. Okay, well, as you can see, I've gotten the modules back inside, got them put together. I've checked them out. My little switcher here, the light's on, and I've run it all across all of this track, and it does fine now. So everything came out okay, nothing got clogged, and now the point mechanisms got painted in place. So everything is working fine, just like it was before. Let's talk a little bit about the paint job. Now, I use this Krylon camouflage paint, and it is a very fast drying, super flat paint. And I really love the color. It came out beautiful, and it really has that gritty texture and look that you see around a railroad. However, as you saw from the video, it was a pain in the neck to get that stuff off of the rails once it started drying. As long as you got it done right away, it came off fine. But if you let it sit and dry for just a minute, it started to stick like crazy. So if you're going to do it, break it up into small sections and do it that way so that you can stay on top of getting those railheads clean, because otherwise it's a pain in the neck. Also, as I showed in the video, doing the soap trick really does work. So that's something I would recommend no matter what way you're going to paint it. Run that bar of soap across the top of the rails as I showed you, and then you can just wipe it off with a damp cloth after you're done, and it will come up fairly easily. That said, I think I'm going to go back to using my acrylic paints. I've got my mixture of Poland green and roof brown, which comes out looking about like that. So I'm pretty happy with that, and I'll be using it in the future. And that's what I'll use for the touch-ups and finish work here on the areas around the points and other areas that I want to give a little bit darker look to it. Now for the next week, I'm going to take a break from working on the module specifically for videos. I do have a number of buildings that I need to work on and get built before I can lay that backtrack in here. So that's something that I need to get done first. And I don't know, I might end up doing a video on building kits and how you go about doing that. So that's something I'll be looking at for a possible video. Nick Santo of Nick's Trains had seen the demo run with this little switcher, and he said he was going to send me some of his new Stay Alives. So yesterday in the mail, I got these. So I will be using these, particularly this one right here. Let me show you how big this little guy is. I'll see how close I can get in there. It's big enough to sit on your fingernail, basically. Tiny, very tiny. So I'm sure I can find a place to put that little Stay Alive in this switcher right here. And let me tell you, this switcher needs it. It has always been a problem. I've had it for over 20 years. It was in the first batch that Walthers produced and imported into the country back, around 2000 or so. And it's always been very touchy as far as operations. So I'm fully expecting that installing one of these new Stay Alives in here will do the job for me. So that's what we'll be doing next week. Nick has put together 3 different versions of his Stay Alive, and I'll go over those and we'll talk about how you use those and various other associated tips, and then we will install it in the little switcher. And after that, we'll give it a test run out here on the layout and see how it works. So that's about all I can think of for now. Have a great weekend and a great week, and I'll see you here next week with another video from the DCC Guy. Bye now.